Today is May the 6th, Friday, and our final day of our oral interview with my dad, Bobby Smyth. Today we're talking about he is in USA and the loves of his life he met in the USA.
Okay. Well, I had to stay with my sponsor in Seattle. And so the lady next door, she had 3 children, and they were young children, they were young kids, and she was a wonderful person. And her husband, he got very sick. He was in the military, and he had a stomach injury, and something bad happened to his stomach, and I don't know what that was. But he eventually died while I was living next door. And so this very attractive young widow, wonderful person, wonderful personality, and the 2 houses were close together, and where we ate was in a little neat area, had a nice glass window there looking on the property next door. And so she'd come along there, and I think probably part of it was planned, but she usually always was clipping something when I was out in that room having breakfast or lunch in the people next door. And so I got to looking at her, and I think she's a pretty nice looking young lady. Got to talk to her, and she invited me in for apple pie. Like a God made, and it was made in heaven, that apple pie. She was wonderful. And she had these little kids. And I think Pat was probably 3 to 3, and then Bonnie was a couple of years, and then the oldest was the boy. And so they were a very young family. And so I thought, maybe. So I started dating her, and wonderful personality. She was she played the guitar, and she was the head person in the young people's group. She was a leader for the young people's group. And so she was very religious in a degree. She practiced it, but was a very nice person otherwise. And even that, physically we felt so attracted to each other. And she was such an easy person to be around. And I thought, a lot better than another experience that I'd had back in the old country. And so I was free, and I was 21, and not very rich, mind you.
21.
But, so I started going with her. And we got married up in Bellingham, and I moved in with her in that big house next door, and they had lots of room in there. And I was not one of the real church goers, but I had my own religious beliefs and all of that stuff, and her mother was always trying to convert me and make a little more sound and be happy, like she said, make a joyful sound. And I used to go, whoopee. She didn't like me to say that. Every time she said, are you making a joyful sound? I said, yeah. She said, that's not the joyful sound. I said, it is to me, and that's good enough. And if it's not good enough, that's too bad. So she was always coming down, probably once a month, or every Friday night. We would get off work, bundle the kids into the little Ford we had, and drive up to Bellingham. And then spend, that day and come home on a Sunday. And it was a long drive from Billingham in that car. And coming through Mount Vernon was always a big plug up because there had no stoplights in there. And all of the people coming down from Canada and the weekend was a lot of traffic going on. So one time I'm going down there and the car just started jerking. And I thought, I wonder what that is. And I didn't know very much about cars, you know, being in Ireland that nobody that I knew even had a car. And so I didn't know very much. Anyway, I lifted the hood like I really was an expert and shook a few wires and stuff. And I thought, oh no, I've got to go find a phone booth and call a wrecker. So I found a phone booth, and this old truck came up there, and the guy got it out, and the first thing he checked now was a distributor. And that's a little thing that sits on the side of the engine and tells the engine what to do, because it's rotating with the engine, and that's what goes from one cylinder to the next. And so it's called a distributor, because it goes you, all in sync. And there's a little pair of points that has the high voltage on them that fire the spark plugs that are in each cylinder. It's a very simple little device. He took the top off of there, he looked at it, he got a little file out of his pocket, and he opened these little points in there going like this, and the action as it rotates, and he closed them and put that little file in there and went like that about 3 or 4 times. And there was just with the sparking, it put just a little burn piece in there, and that stopped it from working, which stopped my car from running. And he did that, and then he got a little piece of paper and closed them and put it like that and cleaned them up. Any little bits of the metal that come loose with his little file, put the top on it and says, you're ready to go. And it was $40 way back then.
Ooh. Oh my
$40 for a record to come out there.
That's a lot.
And when he put back together again, I sat behind that wheel and started that car, and I said, that is the last $40 I will ever pay to have this car running. And I went to the library and I got books on what made the car run, how to fix it, and the engine. I stuck to the engine, but I got better and better and better. So then I started buying cars.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I would buy a car as long as it looked good. The engine could be banging and making all kinds of weird noises. I knew I could fix it. So I would buy a car sitting on somebody's lot and saying, I give you $25 for your car, because all I wanted was a nice body, because that kind of work I didn't do. Didn't do body and fender work, but I was good at engines. And so about every other week, I was buying a car, tweaking up the engine, and then selling it for 35 or 40, put it out front. And the people up the street, the neighbors up there, really nosy, and he says, how come you're getting so much money to spend on all these cars? And he said again, he had a little new Buick, and there was fancy painting down the side, little nice lines on this new Buick. And so he pulled over and he says, where are you getting all the money? And I said, you know how much I'm getting for a car? Twice as much as it costs you to put that little line along the edge of your car. That's how much I get out of this thing. And then that whole thing got out of that. Here's Smyth making all this money. But it was fun. And then the more I fixed old cars, the better I got. And then I started changing engine. And so, make a long story short, Michael had this old Cuda, and it was a big old kind of sporty car, and the engine was bad. So I said, okay, Michael, I'm going to teach you to work on a car. And by then I think he was about 12 or 14 maybe, getting to a good age. And I taught him everything I knew about rebuilding that engine. And so I said, now you've got a hot car, keep it under wraps. Don't go speeding or anything like that, because you helped me build the engine. And so my wife, Theo, she says, you know, the nice thing is, if we ever have problems in our marriage, it's going to happen because every night after dinner you were working on that car for Michael. And after I released that car to him, 2 days he had it until he wrapped it around a utility pole and bent the whole frame.
That was Michael and not Gary?
No, that was Michael.
Oh, wow.
And then Gary, I started working on radios because there was a guy up the street, Leroy Fox. He, every day he went down to the big marina, which we had in Ballard there. And he would go through all the dumpsters on the marina, and you can believe, I mean, 6 packs of beer and everything was thrown in the dump. Guys, you know, had a weekend out with their friends. They were going to haul all that stuff home, so they just cleaned the boat out for the next hell, and stuff they'd throw away. And they got a tool and the little plug was broken on it. Leroy was right there to fish all this stuff out. Then he brought it to me to put new plugs and stuff in them. And so we had a good thing. He fed me stuff, and
I didn't know any of that.
and I did fixing all of that stuff. And I was teaching Gary about radio, because I was into that. And anyway, he was doing pretty good. And we'd go down to like the St. Vincent de Paul and buy all these radios that looked like churches. You've seen those old radios? They were just like in front of the church. And then they had everything in them. We used to buy those like for $2-3 at the jump in St. Vincent de Paul. Everybody was throwing that away for the new radios. And they were throwing them out. So we used to buy a lot of that stuff. And I was teaching Gary how to fix it. So just to make things kind of simple, in those radios they had a thing called a capacitor. And it was about this big and about that big around, and it was for holding high voltage. And I told Gary, now watch those capacitors. And so one day he got this radio, and he had it opened it up, and he had it charged then before that. And then he went to cut that high voltage capacitor out of there. And it was charged with maybe about 500 volts. And so Gary got his hand to pull that wire, and I was outside at the time to hear this scream, and it was Gary. He had dropped the radio, came running out and yelled, "Dad, I don't know what happened, but now I got a big shock." And that just dissuaded Gary from the radio. I even had little cards, Oswald radios. There's some of those around. But we did that kind of a thing. So anyway, after I was married, it was probably about, I would say, 11 months when one day my wife was crying when I came home, and I said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And she says, "I had an accident with a car." And I said, "You're a careful driver. What happened?" And she says, "I was coming through Ballard, and I was coming up to a stop sign, and there was a car sitting there already ahead of me." And she says, "When I came time to put the brake on, I couldn't get my foot off the floor. My foot wouldn't lift. And I ran right into that car and rear-ended them." And I said, "You couldn't get your foot off the floor?" "No." She said, "It's okay now, but at the time I couldn't lift my foot." And I said, "Boy, we're going to group health to see what's the matter with you." And then they diagnosed that she had MS starting. Yeah. And so that was a little bit of the trying thing. But you know, when you have a relationship called love, a lot of those trials just become part of your life. And she just kept getting slowly worse until she was an invalid. Total, she couldn't stand or walk, or her legs would pull up into spasms and stuff like that. And so finally I said, this is not going to be any life for you lying in this bedroom. We're going to move you into the living room where the kids are and where all the activities are going on, and you're beside a big picture window. And there she stayed. And it was about 11 years.
At least, yeah.
So the kids all were growing up, and I had an old boat, a big old boat, and I used to carry their mom on my hip and walk down to the boat, and she was perched on my hip. In Ballard, I had the boat, a 28 big old dream boat, had a sliding door on the side, which was perfect. So we'd slide that door open, and I'd have her on my hip and step through there and put her in one of the bunks. Yeah, and then we'd all go away together. Yeah, go up into the Cayman Islands, to San Juan Islands, and the kids would go ashore and all of that. And they had a little old dream boat we pulled behind it. It was a little, just a nice little rowing boat, you know. And the kids just loved that. They'd row ashore and get clams and stuff like that. And so they grew up, and the time just came along, and that was it. And we stuck with her all those years, and the kids, they had that part of not having a mom. And so they pitched in and did a lot of the cooking and canning. My God, we had apple trees, and we had raspberry bushes, and we made jam and
Pear tree, pear and cherries, and yeah.
Yeah. So when cooking time, we'd go up to Marysville, and what was it? We got blackberries? No,
We'll get blackberries down at the.
Strawberries in Marysville.
I think it
Could be
was. I
strawberries.
think it was raspberries or something like that.
Strawberries and raspberries, probably. We
Yeah,
had raspberries in the backyard.
And yeah, that's where we got them. And then we bought. It must have
Probably
been
strawberries.
strawberries,
Yeah.
because we got them in the big can up in Marysville, and come back and
Yeah, that would have been strawberries.
Yeah,
You
we
could
went
buy
up
the big metal cans of them. Yeah.
we'd have the 4 burners going and making jam, and Bonnie, she got tired because we were coloring the jam, different colors.
No, that was the pears.
That's right, it was the pears of our pear tree that we were canning too. And so we'd color the pears. And so one time Bonnie said, I'm getting tired, you're always telling me what color to make this next one, what color. I'd like to start coloring some of the jam. So, the pears, and we said, okay. And by God, we came home, she got about 12 or 14 jars of pears, pure black. Black pears.
She loved to mess with the food coloring.
Oh,
And I think Bonnie eats just about all of them because we always went for the color. And so,
She would make blue gravy and red potatoes or something. She'd put food coloring and stuff, and we'd have to eat at candlelight because
we
the
still-
food colors were so gross.
we still had that mince. Bonnie used to make that mince very often.
Yep,
And it's an old Irish thing that you do,
it's very good.
chopped, what was it, ham and potatoes and peas, and made a whole meal out of it. But
1 pound of hamburger, feed all of us.
we got along. And here was the surprising part. She was the head of the young people's group at the church, And you know, they were never in that house.
Yeah.
And not only that, she never heard from any of them. As soon as she lost the vitality,
Yeah.
and she was not there with her guitar, she couldn't play her guitar anymore, and it just fell away. And it's amazing how that happened. But anyway, I stayed with her until she passed away. That's the lady right there, look at
Is that
that.
Theo?
No, this is good.
Oh,
So,
Are you in that picture? Are you in the
No,
camera?
no.
Oh, no.
no, I'm telling you, time for good meat.
Oh, I see. So anyway, that was Theo, and very nice and talented person. And eventually we had to let her go. And that was quite a blow, you know, when you get into that kind of a situation. But we did it. They grew up with no active mother. They were part of the running the house and doing things and stepping in, and I remember it came along, there was some big parade in Ballard or something, and Patty says, oh, people are going to have fancy costumes and everything there. And I said to her, Pat, this is the time for imagination. We don't have fancy costumes or anything. What would you think of that would be fun to go on a parade? And she came up with a box, and they made a costume out of the box. It was some soap. Wasn't it some soap?
I was a washing machine and Bonnie was the clothes dryer. You always came up with great costumes for school, for Halloween and stuff. Oh man, I was Johnny Appleseed with a saucepan on my head one year. Yeah, we were a lot of different things. It was very,
You were the only
you were
one.
already clever, very clever, always.
Oh yeah, it was
had a
all
good time.
improvising.
Yeah.
And I think you carry that forward in your life. I really do.
Oh yeah, my kids got to be really crazy things too. Bag of French fries. Yeah.
To be able to teach independence
Yes.
and be creative, not what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
And you've done a wonderful job
Thank
of
you.
that, I
Thank
tell
you.
you. Yeah. Anyway, so Goodney is my second one, and then she was worked as an EEG technologist at the university. She was schooling at the university, and they had attached her to EEG lab, and that's encephalography, electroencephalography. And so that's where I met Goodney. And she confessed to me quite frequent after our marriage. She said, you know, when you walked in that door, she says, I knew that you were the one I wanted. Think of that. Just when I walked in the door, she said she knew.
Wow.
And that was a wonderful, wonderful woman. Wonderful life. We did everything together. Every picture you ever see of us, ever, holding hands, we never sat down, but she would put her hand over and take my hand, and that's where we would sit. And I've had some of my friends, the pirates, even, you know, say, boy, you sure had a wonderful, loving wife there, you know, and it showed. And you didn't have to wave a flag and anything like that. And she was a very clever person. And the problem was, she did a lot of live recordings of brains, exposed brains, where they were actually measuring activity with people that had brain problems. And so she would go in and it would take the top of the skull off and expose the brain, and then Goodney went in with the electrodes and put the electrodes it controlled points all over her brain to look at the brain activity and responses and stuff. And so that's where I think somehow she got that brain infection. That's where I think it came from. And so at the Mason Clinic, when we started having all the problem with AIDS, the technicians in the hospitals, they all got together and they said, we want that on their chart, because we don't know what's going on in this hospital, how they're treating her, and we should know that they have AIDS. And they said no. They didn't put it on their chart. So that was another thing they had to deal with. And the answer was, from the head office, you follow the proper treatment of infectious people. Whether they're, you know what they have or what they don't, you treat them all the same. Dangerous. And you make sure everything is sterilized, and you don't do this, and you don't get yourself exposed from touching infected people. And that was the answer. You don't need to know if they have AIDS or not. And so it was the same with these type of brain problems, that she actually, with her hands, was putting these electrodes touching the brain, and then taking them off again. And then what do you do with the electrodes? They're contaminated. So you have to make sure that they're thoroughly sterilized. And maybe just a little crack in there, and she may have gotten infected. But how would they infect her brain and have that type of an affliction?
Talk a little bit about where you and Goodney lived, because you talk a little about you and Goodney. Where did you live?
In 6511.
And then where did you go after that?
Pardon?
After Theo, my mom, passed away.
Yeah.
And then Dad and Goodney were together, and you lived at the same house, the big 6511 house on 27th Northwest in Seattle.
Yes.
But then you two had both retired, and you had built a house over in Port Ludlow area.
Yeah, it was part of Port Ludlow.
Matt's Bay area.
Yeah.
And then you'd been building a vacation home there, right? And then you turned it into a home, and then you also then sold that and moved to Oregon. You have some things you did there.
We became real estate entrepreneurs.
There you go.
She got her real estate license. I got my real estate license.
Wow.
And when I retired, I was licensed, and I had a professional license. I took night school at North Seattle Community College and got this certificate. And so anyway, I became able to get into real estate, and Goodney loved real estate. It was nothing better we wanted to do was to see a listing and get the directions to find it, and where all of the points were for if they're doing a situation where you have to have the exact spots of the limits of your property, and you had to find these
Markers.
What am I trying to say? The points were the
Survey points.
Surveyors put these steel rods in there, and so we loved to do that together. And so anyway, after I retired from the U of W, I got my nice certificate. I went up to the local realtor's office, and I said, I'd like to become one of your salesmen. And they said, sure. Are you licensed? And I showed them the license, and then I showed them my certificate. He said, well, welcome. So he signed me up as a real estate agent. And so the next morning I went there, and there was about 4 or 5 other real estate agents, and older guys, retirees, that always wanted to have easy living. And so there, and they're reading the paper, and a couple of them were playing cards. And I went in there and I sat down and I said, what are we doing? They said, well, you can see what we're doing. We're enjoying our time here. I said, but that's your time. Why are you here? Why aren't you home? And they said, oh, but we get a chance to look at some property once in a while. And I said, and this is the way it's going to be for me here? I'm going to show up and look guys playing cards and reading the paper and chit-chatting until they open up a bit an hour and a half later. I said, is this the way it is? Well, don't be hoity-toity because it's a relaxed atmosphere we've got. I say, I can tell. When the realtor came in that morning, I went right into his office and I said, I want my license back. One day, after all that education and going to school, I spent one day in that real estate office. It would drive me bloody crazy. That's not what I wanted to do.
They're waiting for people to come to
Yeah.
them.
So then, like, we went down to Oregon and found some nice property there, and that was after we had built that little house down there, right on the ocean. It was an idyllic little place, and it was about a road was about a mile to get into there, and it was pretty big pieces of property that was there. So there wasn't a lot of people on the road, but it was a mile. And it was an older style road, you know, just heavy gravel.
That was that's in Washington State, though, right? You're talking about Washington State?
Washington State,
Yeah,
this is not Oregon.
Not
this
Oregon
is
there. Yeah.
Port Ludlow.
Port Ludlow, yeah.
Just a little bit beyond Port Ludlow. And we were on the water, and it was beautiful, gorgeous view. All the shipping going up Puget Sound and going to Canada. You looked out at the main part of the Puget Sound going past there. And so it was gorgeous. Everybody would always say, oh my God, isn't this wonderful? And then they would comment and say, you're the funny people that have this gorgeous view, and the both of you are sitting with your back to the sun, with your back to this beautiful view. Why aren't you looking out at the view? Because we say it becomes commonplace, and it does. And you've got a beautiful view after a while, it's like a picture on the wall. It's there, but you don't see it.
Yeah.
And then the visitors will tell you how lucky you are. But anyway, so one day we were sitting there and we hadn't talked about the thought of moving anywhere else. We hadn't thought about that. And we had we bought a little motor home at the time, 16 feet long, and we had a 16-foot canoe on top.
Oh.
So the canoe was the same length as our little motorhome. And so Goodney said, why don't we just start traveling around with the motorhome? And I said, yeah, but we live here. And so we're going to move here full time. And Goodney says, you mean for to walk here, the only place we can do is walk that 1 mile down this little odd road to the backs of big pieces of property and then walk all the way back. I said, I will know every fence and every piece of barbed wire on that road after I live here, every day walking that road there and back. So Goodney says, I've been thinking of moving. And I said, that is strange. That's what is in my mind too. So we started traveling. Yeah. And we sold that place. And that was kind of interesting. And then we tried Oregon in our travels. A friend of ours had bought property down there. And it was at Lapine, and it was probably about 15, 16 miles from Mount Bachelor. And it was a Wagon Trail Ranch. And so we decided, let's look at the property there. So we went there and we found 5 acres. Beautiful ponderosa trees, away from everything, and a beautiful part of Oregon. We were there. And so there again, we started getting itchy feet, and we said, let's sell this place and move into Oregon. And that was heaven.
We moved to Washington State?
Pardon?
We mean move.
The other one from Washington,
Yeah.
that's right, near Port Ludlow.
Okay,
Yeah.
from there, moved down, and then you moved. Okay, then
Yeah.
you moved to La Pine.
Another move.
Another move.
But in the meantime, we had taken trips with our little motorhome, just going to different waterfalls. That was another thing. Goodney got the idea, why don't we just travel around looking for waterfalls and videotape the waterfalls using our little boat. And then if we found a place that had a lake and we took the boat off the top, which was no fun thing to get that 16-foot canoe off of there, but we figured out how to do it. And then we'd go out in the lake and enjoy that and put it back up there again. But the only thing about closeness, if you want to have closeness, you should live in that little 16-foot motorhome. Because we had a toilet, we had a little toilet in there, and they still had the motorhome. It's still in Michael's garage up there. Still got that little 16-foot motorhome. But anyway, to get to the bathroom, you had to stand up, move the table set in the middle of the little walkway to get to the back. And so we had to take everything off the table as we were in the middle of dinner, and I had to go take a pee, clear the table off, get the table off the center of the floor, make room for me to pass and go to the bathroom and come back, and then dinner had to be put all back on the table. And this would probably go on maybe a couple of times during the evening. And they still had that. And we slept in the overhead, had a bunk, and over the drivers, where the driver is, it sits over the top of there. And so you had to climb up there and get into bed. And she'd always like to be in the inside, so she had to climb up, and then climb over me, and get to the other side of the bed. And everything actually was always a laugh. There was always something silly going on. And we had a wonderful time. Wonderful.
When did you buy the land here at
oh, yes.
Yeah, at Ocean Shores, because you came up here on one of your adventures with the
Oh,
motorhome?
well, yes.
Okay.
See, we used to bring you kids down here. We all came down here to dig clams. And I thought Ocean Shores was way over that way where the water was, and had a nice beach and a road. And when you got your clams, you had a fire and stuff, and eat your clam there, cook your clams, and then went home. That was Ocean Shores. Honest to God. That's all the kids ever knew was Ocean Shores. That's true. And one time we got stuck in the soft sand. I don't know if you remember that. And there was 4 or 5 people saw our plight. And so they all came running down there, and everybody was hauling and pushing and trying to get the car to come back. And then they got another car and hooked on there. And here's Goodney. She's sitting in an easy chair and sitting way back. And
No, that would have been Mom.
that was your mom.
Yeah, Mom, not Goodney. Yeah.
Yeah, but see,
okay.
we had your mom
Yes.
in that boat, and she was queen of the bay. And that
Yes.
was another thing. We were at Anacortes one time when the kids were little, and this is with Theo, their mother, and she was paralyzed and then in the bunk. And so we were sitting at the dock. We had just come across the bay into, I'm trying to think of the name of the passage, but we come into this passage and we got pounded coming in there. And so we had anchored the boat at this little marina. And so I got up about 2 in the morning, and I got out of I was in the top bunk, and I swung my feet around and dropped down. And all the boards on the bottom of the boat that separated the bills were floating.
Oh, God.
Yeah, my feet went down to the bottom of the keel of the boat. And I thought, oh my God, we're going to sink.
Yeah.
Because they had a little tiny motor, and that's where the air intake for the engine was pretty low.
Mm.
And I was afraid that I started the engine, it would suck all that seawater in there.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So what could I do? The kids were there and had Goodney, and now what did I do?
Yeah,
Not
Theo.
Goodney.
Theo.
Theo.
Yeah.
She had Theo there. And so I went up on the top and just started yelling, help, help, help. And pretty soon I'd have about 3 or 4 people come running down the dock.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we're sinking. And they had a big long strip of caulking. See, it was a big V-bottom boat, and they had a big keel. And then there was a big long caulking to keep the water from getting up the keel and into the bills. And then it come loose.
Oh, geez.
And so all the water was leaching up into the bottom of the boat. So I don't know who it was, but somebody got a rope and they threw him on our boat, and we had to go halfway down this marina, going from boat to boat, throwing the rope to the next, and they pulled us all the way around that marina. It had a little lift at the end of the marina, little boat lift, and they pulled us all the way around there.
Her real name Carmen. She was with us then.
And the kids are all
High
still on the boat, and of course they were still in the boat. We got around there, and they had already called, the police had called in advance for them to come and open up the dock. So they lowered the dock, and they were waiting on our boat going in there. And so then they put these kettle blocks below the boat and put things from the side to keep it from tipping, and lifted us out of there. And we were on the dock, I think, probably 3 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I learned to caulk the boat, and the kids would come down that ladder and go ashore, and then they slept on the dock, and they loved to sleep on the dock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was me and a girlfriend, Carmen.
Yeah,
The two of us, we slept out on that dock, and Mike was with us, because Mike was younger than me, of course.
yeah.
So, yeah, and Carmen and I, we had a lot of fun. That was in Anacortes. I
Yeah.
remember it really well. I still have pictures of me and Carmen on our air mattresses on that dock where we slept.
Yeah, I got a lot of pictures of the boat up on the dock and
Yep,
where we were working on it.
yep.
And then we had to feed Theo and cook and take the food up the ladder. She stayed on the boat all the time. And so we had to go up and take the food up to keep her going. At night I slept on the boat, and the kids, they all liked to get their sleeping bags.
Slept out on that
And
dock.
even when
Yep.
we were traveling anywhere, they always slept on the dock.
Yep. Okay,
Yeah.
so a little bit more about Ocean Shores, and you bought land here,
Yeah.
and then Goodney passed on.
Yeah, well then when we came down to Ocean Shores, and I thought Ocean Shores was the beach, clams, and go home. And so we were parked way down there in our little motorhome, and I said to myself, I'm going to take a walk. And so I got off there and took a walk, and about a half a mile away or a quarter of a mile away, I saw a bridge. And I thought, wonder why they got a bridge here, because the sea's over here. And by God, here was a whole big lake running as far as I could see. And it was the large canal, which runs the full length of Ocean Shores, freshwater canal. And I thought, my God. And we went over the bridge and walked a little ways, and then there was another bridge. And there's another circle with all the houses all around there. And I thought, my, what a place this is. I never knew this was all here. And so then we decided we were going to come back again and look. And down here, this is the honest truth, probably about every third or fourth lot was for sale here in Ocean Shores. They couldn't give them away. And all you needed was to put down a small down payment and a small monthly payment and take command of the lot. And see, a lot of people didn't look at it the way we did, because we said, all we want is control of it. We never want to own this stuff. As long as we make our monthly payment, and so you made the monthly payment as low as you could afford, and you could get in like $200 down payment, yeah. And then maybe something like maybe $100 a month on the principal. They couldn't sell, they couldn't give the things away. And so we grabbed a couple of things here, and I thought, oh my God, this is just an incredible place where you can actually have a house on fresh water at Ocean Shores. And so anyway, we set up one of them on the not the Bass Canal, the Grand Canal, on the other side of there, and we set up a campsite with nice little park, stove, and you could cook on them. And so we set that all up nice like that. And Michael was here. And so we went to see him, and I had come around the end of this road here, and on the way to see Michael, and there was a for sale sign on this lot. It was 90 feet, a lot and a half. 60 feet and then another 30 on top. So this is a lot and a half. And so anyway, I come in and I looked at this lot, and I said, to goodness God, this is a lot closer to town than the other one, which was a lot further out. This is close to town. And so anyway, I went to the real estate office and I said, I want to make an offer on that lot. And she says, well, have at it. So I made an offer, and she says, that's a bit low. I says, now look, I've been in real estate, and you have to present my offer whether you think it's low or not. That's your job. You present the offer. You're not the judge. You don't own that. You just handle the paper. So I did, and within 24 hours, I get this call and it says, you got yourself a deal.
Wow.
Yeah. And so then I called the realtor back and I said, I've got another lot that's further away out there. And I said, if you can sell that, I'll put that with there for you to sell and get a commission off that. They sold it, and just almost in the same day, they called back and said, we've sold your lot. I said, who did you sell it to? She says, the people next door.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
That was, everything just kind of fell in place. So then a couple of years went by, and one time I told Benny, I said, we've got property in Oregon, why don't we sell that and come up here and take that nice fat check from Oregon, where they got nice big property down there, and buy a whole bunch of these nice lots, just to own them. Never to take possession of them, just control them. And I'm only making like $100 a month, and everything that Goodney was making at the Mason Clinic bought property. That was our arrangement. Invest that in property. And so we had that all, she had quit by then, but that was our whole philosophy. Was buy to control, not buy to own.
So then how many years were you in Oregon then about? Altogether? How many years did you live in Oregon altogether?
I would say probably maybe 12, 13 years in Oregon. I loved Oregon. I really did. But out of all the places, I like Edinburgh best. Even my hometown in Belfast.
Why? Why Edinburgh?
Because the last time we went there, I told Goodney, I said, we've got to go home and visit my birth site. And we did find our house. It was 47 Houston Street. And we went and we found it. And it was on a Sunday. And I wanted to go take the number 47 off the door and put a nice new one on there, but I'd like to have that. And they wouldn't open the door because we were pretty well dressed for Belfast on a Sunday. And they must have looked out and thought we were some kind of church people because they wouldn't answer the damn door.
Oh.
And then a year later, we went out there. It was all gone. They wiped out all that whole neighborhood and
wow.
put in rental for people. There was a corporation, is the city who owns it, and that's for low-income residents.
In Belfast.
So my home and all that associated.
But why Edinburgh? Because it's so beautiful?
Pardon?
Why do you say Edinburgh was your favorite of all?
Edinburgh is the capital city in Edinburgh, of Scotland, is in Edinburgh. And the people were so nice and easygoing, and they love the Irish, but the English don't like the Irish. They just don't like the Irish. And it's from the days when there was a lot of low income Irish moved to England, and the women were the only job a woman had was maids. And that was the same when the Irish moved to the United States. The only thing they wanted was jobs in rental houses.
So when you lived in Edinburgh, that was during the war, when you were there for your
The war had just ended.
Had just ended.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was where you were with Pamela, right?
That's when I decided to move here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Very
Pamela. Good. Pardon?
I say that was a whole lot of stuff, but
Yeah.
that was my first.
The first wife.
Girlfriend.
And we talked about that already.
Yeah.
So we are over time at this point. So let's talk a few minutes about, I guess, building the house here. We're in Ocean Shores now.
Yeah.
Because you built a home here, and you built that on your own because Goodney had passed away. And you made the move to the property here, which puts you close to Mike, my brother Mike. And then Bonnie and Dale also decided to move here and loved the area. Dale particularly was drawn to Ocean Shores. And Bonnie thought she was too far away from the big shopping in Nordstrom's, but she conceded and was very happy with her new home here when they moved. And so the one other thing we didn't touch on, you've been living here, still in your own home. You're going to turn 98 this summer on your birthday, still living here with your best companion ever, Murphy. And we haven't talked about a big part of your life from when I was younger and can remember is the Seattle Seafair Pirates.
Well, you know what? When I'm down in the
So I don't know how you can, we'll give you 10 minutes, Dad. Tell us about the Pirates.
Okay. Okay. I was living in Seattle, and I had just moved there not too long prior to. I went to a place, and it was called Fremont, which is a part of Seattle. It's kind of a funky little town. And anyway, I was poking around, and I saw one of these junk shops. And I thought, I wonder what's all about here. And so I went and was looking through the front window, and I saw this big round badge that people give away, you know, in parades and stuff. And it turned out to be a very valuable one, but I paid like $2 or something like that for this big button. I bought it. And it said something about Seafair Pirates. And so I had heard the bangs and all of that stuff, and I knew one of my neighbors that was part of my family that sponsored me here. He was a pirate. And so I said, what was that stuff? He said, oh, that's the Seafair Pirate. He said, they've been going since 1950. And I said, oh, really? And anyway, that was that. And so I got this button. And so it was probably maybe 5 years after that meeting with my neighbor, and he was a pirate, I ran into him, and he was in a bar. And so I went into the bar, and I was going to have a beer, and I sat down with him, and pretty soon somebody yelled, Andy, give us a song, and his name was Andrew. So he, down on the floor beside him, up came his ukulele, and he started playing a couple of songs. And by the time that second song had finished, there was about 4 beers apiece that people had bought for him entertaining, and they thought that I was with him. And so I'm sitting there seeing all this beer for a song, and I thought, my God, are you still part of the Pirates? He says, yeah, I'll get you in. And so that was where I got introduced and got voted in to be Seafair Pirate. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I made my own costume, painted my own shirt and everything, and I still have it. And it fits. My shirt and pants, I still had my original one. And the guys were poking fun at me because I looked so un-pirate looking, but nevertheless, they let me in. And so that was the opening and the beginning to adventures that the average person will never see. And acceptance in those days, if you were with the Seafair Pirates, you were treated like a rock star, honest to God. They were so popular in the 50s and 60s. Yeah, you could go in anywhere and the beer is always yours just like that. The girls would come up and want a pin, a pirate pin, Seafair Pirates. And I happen to have a few of those with me. And so I say, okay, come here. Go through the making sure you were nice and flexible, and you turn around and I would say, where do you want me to put it? And they'd pull back whatever they had, and they'd say, right there, right on top of the target area. And so then out came the sleeves. And I put my hand down the front of their shirt. Their hand. And they said, is this necessary? I said, yes. This is to keep me from sticking the pin into the wrong place. I have to know where it is. And this is all of the pattern that we went through. And the women and the pirates. And everywhere the pirates went, there was always girls and women. Not always the best of women, But you would be surprised. I was shocked at the quality of the women. Yeah, secretary level and things like that. Nice people. That if you seen them away from the pirates, they wouldn't even turn their nose up at you. But once you had that costume and you were giving away the pins, they wanted part of that. Yeah. And so anywhere you ever wanted to go, you could just flag your hand up like that and cars would stop and take you wherever you wanted to go.
So you went to some pretty fun destinations with the Pirates. Yeah, I remember.
Oh, the destination.
Mardi
Oh,
Gras. Yeah. You guys went to Mardi Gras and rode in Mardi Gras?
Mardi Gras, we took the duck down there.
Yep. And rode
We
in
stripped it all off of there and went down to Mardi Gras, and we got in a big parade. And the guys were just wonderful. And when the big parades are down there, everybody on all of those big floats carry pins and little goofy gifts that you can toss. And so when they're going down the street, the crowds all crush up against, not like Seattle where they want that big space for fear somebody may get below the wheels. And Mardi Gras, you're on your own. And they said in the law that if you show up, you're responsible for your behavior. Once you show up, you're implying that any suit of any guilt about something running over your feet because you came too close, that's your problem. You can't sue the city.
And then you went to the Cayman Islands too?
Oh yeah, I'm just getting to the big parade they had down there.
Oh, okay.
And so anyway, we had two guys from the university that had gotten into the Pirates. One was the dean of men, and then the other one was the manager of the, I'm trying to think the name of the big cafeteria and everything they had.
The hub?
The hub.
Pardon?
The Husky Hub?
The hub,
Yeah.
the manager of the hub. And I had both those guys, and they weren't really pirates, they were just there as guests. I got them as guests because they always wanted to do this for the pirates go to Mardi Gras. And anyway, they had jumped off the dock. And so they had mingled with the crowd a little bit, and then they decided that they were going to get lost because you couldn't hardly even move. So they started to get back on the dock. And so the police, there were lots of them, they saw these two guys weren't pirates, were trying to board the dock. So they grabbed those guys and put them in a car. They thought that they were interfering with the pirates display. So we had to stop the dock, and the captain got off and had to find out where they had these two guys from Seattle, the dean of men and the manager of the hub. And anyway, so that was just part of it all. And then in the evening was drinking time. Everybody, even the kids, had a bottle of beer. And that just frustrated me, the very fact that the police around there on those parades courses are all boxed in. And I said, why do you tolerate that? And the guy said, how would you like to go into that half-drunken crowd and pull a kid out of there? They'll kill you. They're citizens and they'd like to have a little beer themselves. So leave them alone. We'll stay here. We've got them all in one place, Bourbon Street. And if we start having trouble with the crowd, they'll spread out. And we don't have the manpower to keep track of that many people. So we don't do anything to upset the crowd. They can do any damn thing they want.
Wow.
And they're rooming out on all the little hotels, and they had little verandas. And they were all out there, and then they'd take their shirts off and wiggle their chests and all that. I mean, it was just nasty stuff. Nasty place to be.
But tell us about going to Cayman Islands, like in any other places that the pirates went. I think they did.
Oh, yeah. Now, see, the Cayman Islands, that's part of the British Empire, the Cayman Islands, and they're under, well, they've got their own government and representative of the Cayman Islands with the British government, and they provide, you know, Army and Air Force coverage and all of that, and they've got more banks in the Cayman Islands than probably the whole world, because you just open a little bank and get into the banking business, and so that's where came a lot of the offshore money.
But you guys were invited there, right?
Oh yes, we were invited by them, and in fact I've got two things that were from the government invited to the ball, the governor's ball, and so that was really a big deal, and they just made us like honorable residents, and if you were walking down the road at night, you didn't have to hold your hand on a card, put over and say, "Mr. Pirate, you need a ride?"
Oh.
Yeah, and we were just stars.
And then you did a cruise ship too, didn't you?
Pardon?
Weren't you guys on a cruise
Oh, yes.
ship?
Yes. See,
And
that
then-
was another thing we were on. The pirates were on this cruise ship. And so they stole, the people stole our flag off the back of the boat. We had it on the stern pole. They had the Union Jack there, but they had the pirates' flag. So when we got on there, about the first couple of days out on the cruise, and they stole the flag off of there. Now where the hell is our flag? And so they started every day on the bulletin board, they would have a clue telling us where to look for the flag. And the whole thing didn't come out until 5 days later. We had to finish that part because we all had to go home. And so they had it was a departure, kind of a little ball they had. And so we were supposed to find out at this ball where the flag was. And so everybody wondered, boy, we've been searching all these clues and everything. And almost at the last dance type thing, there was a gal there, and she looked like that Western singer. I'm trying to think of a well-known, but she was a well-known singer, and she had a big coiffure.
Dolly Parton?
Dolly Parton.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so she was made up like Dolly Parton with a big coiffure and everything. And so during one of the breaks, the pirates, she was on the floor, and so 3 or 4 of the pirates rushed out there and surrounded her. And Dolly Parton's in the middle with a big coiffure, and so the guys had like brassieres, and they would throw it over their shoulder, and nobody could see what was going on, and then they throw a pair of hands, and it looked like they were stripping her. And in the end, they took off her coiffure, and that was the flag in there that was all folded up. And we threw the flag out there. And that was the end of that whole big deal about hiding everything.
So now that you're here at Ocean Shores, and there is a Irish bar here.
Yes.
And then the pirates come down here occasionally, right? They've had pirate conventions here.
Yes.
And then you still, from time to time, join in still in those pirate conventions here.
Yeah, that's their big deal.
Okay.
That's put on by that big restaurant. And then we started a pirate group over in Westport.
Oh.
That's another big pirate over there. Pirate group that we started.
Oh.
Independent groups. But, and it was 1968, I joined the Seafair Pirates. And because I had learned to play the baritone ukulele with Andy Phillip, they were the only two musicians, stringed instruments the pirate had. And they had a guy with a trumpet and a flute. And that's all we had. And so one guy said, I've got an idea. Why don't we write to the government and tell them that we would like to go overseas to entertain the Washington troops? And all the pirates said, oh, you're full of crap. There's no way you're ever going to get that. So Mayor Dorn Bremen was the mayor of Seattle. They went to Mayor Dorman Rainer, and they got his full approval of us doing such a thing. And so this guy that had set this up, Bob Staunton, he was a real pusher. So he took that letter he got from Don Bremen, went to Magnuson, one of our top senators, and Magnuson is the one that brought Boeing and all of those big things. Wonderful big senator we had. So Magnuson, he put his stamp of approval on it, and now this guy, he got Bremen, he had Magnuson, and Jackson was the other big senator. So he went to Jackson. And now he's got the mayor and 2 senators wishing us well and encouraging us to put a team together to go over and entertain the boys in Vietnam. That's true.
Well, you went to Korea, South Korea, and Japan. You didn't go to Vietnam.
That's where we were bound.
Oh, you were bound
You see,
for
the
Vietnam.
war was still going on.
Oh, okay.
And so they called it the Vietnam Special, is what they wanted to do. And they were all going to be personalities. We already had Miss Washington, and we had Mrs. Washington, and we had a band, Black and White Affair. They were 2 colored and 2 white guys. And then we had Mrs. Washington. And so that's the people that were going to go with us and do the performance. The band was going to play, and the girls were going to sing. And we were going to do the pirate stuff. So anyway, then I still had these letters. And I think they're on that one thing that I had for our overseas trip. So anyway, we got all of those together. They sent it to Johnson,
Oh, wow.
President Johnson, saying that we wanted to take the Washington entertainers and then go overseas and look up all the Washington servicemen and have a verbal interview. And we had hired one of the newsmen from KVI. He was going to be in charge, Davy Jones. He was in charge of the group because of his personality and his affection with the news. And so we had some good names in there. So he wrote to President Johnson. Now I have copies of the letter, and it was from the Adjutant General of the United States on us. Adjutant General said that President Johnson has told him to make room for this idea of taking Washington people going and entertaining Washington troops in the war zone. I've got those.
So what happened? Why did you guys not do Vietnam then?
Well, the problem was, if you were active during the Vietnam War, it was a very mobile war. And the Viet Cong were giving us a hell of a lot of trouble because they had moved underground. They had their whole headquarters underground.
So what was the delay then? What year did you guys go and then go to, because you went to Japan and South Korea, right?
Yes, that same trip.
Yeah. Oh, same trip.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were going to go
Yeah,
those
see,
areas
so
and also Vietnam.
No,
Oh,
see,
okay.
what we were going to go, first to Japan, and then do all of the R&R stations for the wounded. And they were all in Quonset huts. They were recovering from their wounds in Nam, and they got them out of Vietnam and sent them to Japan to these rest stations that they had to recover from their wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to go around all of those R&R stations, and then whatever time we had left, then we did the military bases. Zama and a place like that, and Tachikawa, and all of these places with military people, we would go there and see if there was any Washingtonians there. And then J.J. Valley, being the newsman, he would seek them out and do interviews, and then they'd play them over the air. Mm-hmm. Now, we were to go from there, we were going from there right to Indochina to the war. And then it came out, I still had the little clipping, and it said that the war's complexion had changed, and that instead we had 16 of us, that 16 was too many people to have in a war zone because of the Viet Cong suddenly dropping into call. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't guarantee the safety of 16 citizens out there in the war zone. And so they decided, no, we won't do that. We'll do everything in Japan, and then we'll go to Korea and we'll do all of the military bases in Korea, including Panmunjom, which is where all the peace villages are, and that's where all the warheads all meet periodically in Panmunjom. And so we did that, and I happened to have a meeting the day before we got there, and just before they left, we put on a show for them. For all that, and I've got pictures of the girls in this lounge, and with admirals and all kinds of stuff taking their arms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all in one thing. But anyway, that kind of ends up the whole glory of it, because that was the end of my pirating stuff too. I kind of still go back to that. And now I'm a citizen, just talking about the old times and the way it used to be.
Thank you, Dad. Thank you. This was really good.
Boring.
No.
Your life has not been boring.
You almost had what I was about to say. So, thank you, Dad. Dad's been directing his energies towards Jenny here, who is with me, and just sit there, Dad.
I'm just square.
So me, your video photographer here, and soon to be video editor, and Jenny, who Dad's been looking at.
Good. Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this.
Girls.